Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk with Tom, and whatever happened to Robot Jones? Well, it's over. It ended a long time ago. And honestly, the writing was kind of on the wall. Not because it was a bad show, because they were doing some things that they probably shouldn't have been doing. They were saying some things that were kind of on the line. Like, this didn't seem to be a show that was meant to last or carry Cartoon Network into the next generation. It seemed to know its fate from the beginning. It seemed to know, like, okay, we're probably not going to be on the air for too long. And that's why if you watch it back, you might find yourself asking, like, wow, they really didn't give a f, did they? There was so much going on in this show that actually made it very unique. I remember the show pretty well, but I was also very young when it came out. And, I didn't really like it too much because of the Schoolhouse Rock art style, and it felt old, and it felt like too cartoony. It felt too out there for me, to where I couldn't really buy into it or become invested in the story, like, when I was younger, the art style very much made or break a cartoon for me. And I didn't care about the story or the characters nearly as much as I cared if a show looked right to me or not. I'm not saying the show looks bad, but like as a kid, I didn't like it. I wasn't really convinced that a cartoon like really mattered unless it looked like clean and professional looking. And this kind of looked like something that would come on in the middle of the night when you're like having bad dreams and you gotta watch something before you go back to bed. Regardless of how I felt when I was an uncultured child, this show is actually pretty cool. I wouldn't rank it up there with like some of the best shows of all time, but it certainly has earned its place in the archives. All that being said, what is so unique about this show? What does make it special? Well, let's get into it. First off, the premise is that Robot Jones is a robot. Shocking, I know. That goes to middle school in the 1980s. And that's pretty much it. But there didn't seem to be anywhere the show is afraid to go. Look at the principal. That's clearly Adolf Hitler. It's convenient that he isn't a big fan of technology and takes that out on Robot Jones. Like they just straight up put Hitler in a cartoon in the early 2000s, and they're just like, yeah, no, a kid's cartoon. Not like a Family Guy type of thing. Like, it was a kid's cartoon, and they just put Hitler in there as a character. I mean, it wasn't Hitler, but it was clearly meant to be interpreted as Hitler. They also did an episode simply titled Gender, in which the fact that Robot Jones is a genderless robot becomes explored, and the fluidity of Robot Jones' gender is shown through the fact that he just seamlessly transitions into a woman over the course of like a single makeover. I mean, imagine if that aired today. The amount of people who would scream about SJW propaganda because a robot with no gender chooses to present itself as the opposite gender than what it was presenting itself as prior. Like, it's a robot. It doesn't have any gender to begin with, so it's like gender itself is just a social construct based on biological traits that a robot doesn't even have to begin with. But what I really liked about this show was its we really don't care attitude managed to keep it from falling into a pitfall that I've seen a lot of shows aimed towards this type of audience fall into. And that's the fact that it's a show that's set in middle school with middle school aged kids that actually seem to act like they're in middle school. Like these kids are in middle school. That means like they know a thing or two by now at this point in their life. Oftentimes TV tries to pretend that anyone under the age of 18, or in the case of TV ratings, I guess closer to 14, they have never heard a swear word. They have never felt any type of superficial attraction to a boy or girl their own age. Ultimately, what I'm getting at is sometimes shows will market themselves towards a certain age and kind of act condescendingly towards that demographic. Like, they'll pretend that it's like, okay, we're marketing towards like middle schoolers, that means they're still pure and innocent, at least in like that naive way. No, like middle school's when you start developing. That's when you start screwing up legitimately, and like you have to deal with the consequences. That's when you start actually doing things that you feel guilty over. And that's when like all the weird stuff in your body starts going on. That's the awkward stage of your life that you're not going to be proud of, not just based on how you looked, but based on the type of person you were at that point, because you were still figuring out who you were. But usually cartoons and TV shows that are marketed towards that age group don't like to talk about that. They like to kind of weasel their way around that, and they don't want to acknowledge that like around that age most people are jerks. A lot of shows you watch about middle school aren't that honest about what middle school's like. I mean, I know in Robot Jones they aren't swearing or smoking behind the school or who knows what else middle schoolers do these days, but a good show to compare and contrast this to would be like Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, which, I mean, I love that show. A lot of us love that show. It's a pretty beloved show. But Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide is beloved because it's relatable on the academic side of things. You know, to the point where people relate to it up through most of college. What clubs do I want to join? What classes do I need to take to, do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my life? It's like that kind of thing. But then Ned's Declassified kind of fell back on old tropes of like, here's a bully, here's a geeky friend, here's an unrealistic love interest, here's your friend who's gonna become a love interest later and is more realistic. Which the whole crush thing was kind of weird for me, because like, when I was in school, I would always go for the girl who was considered like unrealistic regardless of like anything else, because I had Kanye West like in my ear giving me confidence, being like, yeah man, like there's no such thing as unrealistic for me, so thank you Yeezy. But then like that usually didn't work out, so thank you Yeezy again for making 808s and Heartbreak. What Robot Jones did was it captured the tone of middle school social life really well. Of course they couldn't do things I mentioned like swear, despite the fact that they would try and push the envelope pretty often. But interactions kind of mirrored what I saw in middle school. Honestly, it brings me back, especially like with my friend group. For half of middle school, I was in a friend group which was like all guys. And like we certainly were not interested in girls more than we were interested in like video games and music and sports and all that stuff. So it was kind of just like Robot Jones. This was my friend group, just it's condensed into fewer people. Whatever happened to Robot Jones? Do you remember him? What was your favorite episode? What were some of your favorite things about it? Why don't you tell us in the comments, tweet us at Roundtable Vids, or tweet me directly at TomEPQM, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel, I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So, if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!